All right, so I'm a professional skeptic. I have an intel background in the military. I was always the guy that been like, no, you gotta. So when you say that there's compelling evidence for this, and mind you, Denver's a friend, also a former military intel officer, and he's the one that wrote the Bigfoot and Why Women Love Him book when he was running for Congress. That's awkward book. That's a weird flex, Denver. Um, what compelling evidence would you share with me that there may be actually there may be a squatch hiding out there?
Well, now, mind you, I'm a skeptic as well, and I'm the biggest skeptic even out of our ghost hunting group. So unless I'm there, I'm not going to put a stamp on it that, oh yeah, this is evidence. But there's some recordings that Adam has done that I I've not heard an animal that sounds like that, and I'm pretty familiar with the woods.
Hmm.
And then there's the actual tracks, and we're still waiting. There's some hair samples that we're waiting to hear back from.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I'm very privileged to have, I'm not Coyote, I'm Captain Bomb, and this is a podcast takeover. So I'm privileged to have Coyote Kyle Yates as my guest on your show. That's kind of weird. Hey, Coyote, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
I have to say thank you for this opportunity to not be your guest. You have had so many guests over the years, and when your people contacted my people and they offered me the opportunity, I said, let's flip it on them. Today, Coyote, you get the chance to talk to your listeners because, man, you got an interesting background, and I want to know more about you. And I know I'm not the only one out there that your listener wants to know about you too. So not you too, but because that's a different band. And we were already talking about bands before we started recording.
Yes, you did.
All right. Here's my first question.
Okay.
And that's not even a question. I got to give you kudos. Your production schedule, going back years, you push out a new podcast, videocast almost every day. That is insane. I did podcast radio for years, and it was weekly, and that was just killing me. Of course, we want to know why you're doing this, but how in the world do you actually push through and get this? You have such a variety of guests. Where do you find your guests? Why are you doing it? How did you first get started in this podcasting thing?
Ooh, well, where do I start? Let's start with how I got started doing podcasts. Now, I'm a paranormal investigator, and I started out on a crew, kind of went to a couple of different crews, didn't like what they were doing, and told my wife, hey, we got the equipment, we got the know-how, let's do our own, or have our own investigative team. And so we started doing that, and as much as I love it, I didn't feel like I was doing enough. So I said, hey, I think I want to start a podcast. I want to talk to people in the paranormal world, whether it's they're on TV or they have their own team or whatever they're doing. And so I started doing that. And a chance meeting with the one and only Adrian Paul. Now, if you're familiar with Adrian Paul, he played the Highlander on television back in the 90s. We spent a good 20 minutes talking about how to deal with arthritis.
As you do when there can be only one. Absolutely.
Yeah, there can be only one. Aspergine. No.
I think you and I are old enough. I have it in the car right now. So that means I'm one step closer to be a Scot portraying a Spanish. Oh wait, no, that was the movie with Sean Connery. Sorry, my apologies. So you had the Highlander on. You were talking about your aching joints.
Well, actually, that was just meeting him in public. We talked about that, and then how do you not ask somebody like that to not be on your show? So I said, Mr. Paul, would you like to be on my podcast? And he said yes, and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to incorporate him on a paranormal podcast, and got the wheels turning, and I went ahead and did it. but I said, we talked about arthritis, and I'm going through some health problems, and I know there's other people out there going through problems as well, and let's do something that's like on a positive note, something inspirational. And so it just spawned into, hey, let's do another show. We got art authors, we got musicians, we got actors, life coaches, psychologists. I mean, anybody that can bring some kind of hope to other people in any form or fashion, let's do it. And
So
it's
so
really
that's
turned
the
into
listen.
helping others.
That's the Listen to the Vibes podcast. And prior to that, the Into the Pit was the paranormal. Have you done
Mhm.
any other podcasts?
Well,
Was it always those two?
it used to just be those two, but then I met this lady named Rachel Maldonado, and she is a therapist, and she helps couples and people with their relationships, and got to thinking, well, that'd be cool just to do a show about that. And when she has time, she'll come on and we'll do a show, but with her schedule, it's kind of been crazy lately. So that was that. And then I met another gentleman who, he had gone through rehab. This guy had drug problems like you wouldn't believe, and he got his act together. And I thought, well, let's do a show about people that have gone through that and having mental problems. And it's hard to get other people to commit to something is when you're passionate about it and they're not. So he kind of bowed out, I guess. I just never called back. But so I just try to keep that kind of theme going when I'm doing Listen to the Vibes.
So this podcast is about positivity and
Mhm.
and motivation, and Into the Pit is about ghosts and Bigfoot. Which I don't know about you, but growing up, me and ghosts didn't. That was not a positivity and motivation thing. You mentioned that you were a paranormal investigator
Mhm.
and you're out there in Texas. You're a ghost hunter. You've had ghost hunters on your show, but was this what you did decades ago? Was this where you thought after, high school and college that you thought your career was going to go to looking for Slimer in the New York Public Library?
No, I wanted to be an album artist. Anything that had to do with music, I wanted to be involved in, since I can't play a note other than on the radio. And my art just, I mean, come on, there's so many artists out there. Unless you're Frank Frazetta or Boris Vallejo, it's kind of hard to get that kind of work. And being a young father, I took whatever job I could get. And when you're trying to take care of a family, your dreams kind of get put on the back burner. And this, doing the podcast, used to be something I do when I got home from work. And if you don't have as much time to put on a podcast. So whenever I ended up with a disease in my spine, so I had to retire early, and I ended up on disability. So now I get to do this full time, well, I can put more time into it.
So I'm sure that there's somebody listening to this that wants to start a podcast and is thinking, man, I'm just an expert in Pokemon cards. Nobody wants a podcast about that. What do you say to that listener who's been listening to your show? What would you say to them about, because you have some hiccups that are preventing you from going out and doing what a typical job is. So what would you say to them?
Well, if you have an interest like Pokemon, you'd be surprised how many people out there have the same interest. And if you'll just go out there and get started, and don't worry about making mistakes. You'll learn along the way. I did. I still make mistakes. I'm still learning. I learn from people that come on my show, some that have podcasts. And if you just get started and don't worry about the numbers, if you love doing it, do it. All right. Don't go out and spend a whole bunch of money on equipment, because you don't have to. You just use what you have on your computer. that stuff will come along the way. I would make sure this is what you love to do before you go and spend the money, because a lot of folks will come in, they get started doing a podcast, they've spent $300 on a microphone and $800 on a pair of headphones, and you buy some fancy computer that's cost them $5,000, and then they lose interest. I find equipment for podcasting in garage sales because people just give up.
Over 90% of podcasts never make an 8th episode.
Really?
Yep. So that's again one of the reasons I really wanted to take over your show, was because I think you have somewhere around 52 kajillion episodes, but I'm not a statistician, so we're not going to specify on that. So you mentioned you have a spinal issue that caused you to go into disability. How did with the mentality that this is a positivity broadcast, how did you suffer through that? Because I also am fully disabled after my time in the military. And man, so many of us vets, when we get that determination letter, or when we get that prognosis, we just plummet emotionally. How do you stick through it? Not only did you stick through it, man, again, a podcast a day, you're nuts.
It's not easy. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's days that I don't know how I get up in the morning. I want to give up, but I think about, there's somebody out there that needs a message. And so that motivates me to keep going and keep going. Especially when you get one of those messages that says, thank you for bringing so-and-so on the show. That's really helped me. And some people, they're on the brink of giving up on life entirely. And then I'll also meet some people that have stories that are a lot worse than what I've gone through. I think, gosh, if they can keep going, why can't I? But, I have a loving family. I have a wife that supports me in so many ways. She has been my inspiration. My 2-year-old grandson lives here with us, and he keeps Papa on his toes.
Well, hopefully he's the one that's getting Papa's stuff. Hand me the remote, kid. You and I are about the same age, and we learned math the same way, with our dad sitting in the chair and them pointing at the TV. All right, 4, now 7, now 2.
Yeah. It's not easy. And you feel emasculated at times because you're used to being the man. You went out and you made the money, and you're the one that did the yard work and all the honeydews around the house. And when that role has kind of been taken away from you, you do feel less of a man. My wife is, I get my disability check, I get my retirement check from the city, but she makes the money, but she doesn't make me feel bad about it.
Yeah, one of the keys is to have a strong tribe, and you have taken the extra step of not just having your inner circle of your wife, and who's doing amazing, but you're expanding your tribe every day with interviewing normally interesting guests. Some of them are weird, like me. Actually, I think I'm the only weird one that you've had, but otherwise, speaking of weird guests, Bigfoot hunting, what?
Yeah.
Because you had that, I don't know if that was it was somewhere on one of your socials. Did you lead a Bigfoot hunting expedition? Have you only interviewed, you have a Sasquatch thing. And we used to have Denver Riggleman as our congressman here in the middle of Virginia, who wrote literally the book about Bigfoot that made national news. But tell me about your love affair with Bigfoot, please.
Okay. I'll have to admit, I'm still on the fence about Bigfoot, but I have a friend of mine named Adam, and he has his own team, and he does that all the time. And I'm really interested in it. I've not officially gone out hunting yet, but I've had several people on that have done the Bigfoot expedition. In fact,
Did they find him?
They say that they have evidence of it, but I don't know. Some of it is kind of compelling, but when you meet someone like Mr. LeBlanc, was on Expedition Bigfoot, Todd Neese, who runs like the biggest convention for Bigfoot in the country. They're so convincing and it's so interesting. I'm like, I want to get in on this. I kind of like to check it out for myself. And, I'm not going to be the one running away from them. I might try to wheel away from them, but
You need to get some big shocks before you go up in the Pacific Northwest. All right, so I'm a professional skeptic. I have an intel background in the military. I was always the guy that been like, no, you gotta. So when you say that there's compelling evidence for this, and mind you, Denver's a friend, also a former military intel officer, and he's the one that wrote the Bigfoot and Why Women Love Him book when he was running for Congress. That's awkward book. That's a weird flex, Denver. What compelling evidence would you share with me that there may be actually there may be a Squatch hiding out there?
Well, now, mind you, I'm a skeptic as well. And I'm the biggest skeptic even out of our ghost hunting group. So unless I'm there, I'm not going to put a stamp on it that, oh yeah, this is evidence. But there's some recordings that Adam has done that I've not heard an animal that sounds like that. And I'm pretty familiar with the woods. And then there's the actual tracks, and we're still waiting. There's some hair samples that we're waiting to hear back from. We don't have the money that Travel Channel or History Channel has to send off to get analyzed, but stuff I don't know. I couldn't tell you what it was.
I think you just put a call out for a sponsor of that Sasquatch soap company to go ahead and fund the examination of those hair fibers. They might even develop a new soap out of it. So you haven't gone out on the Bigfoot expeditions, but you have gone ghost hunting.
Yes.
And primarily in the Texas area, or?
Yes, I did one investigation in Ohio, and that was at the Ohio State Reformatory.
Yeah, is it always an asylum? Like, because what are the prerequisites for? Yeah, let's go investigate this thing. Was somebody murdered there, or a bunch of crazy people? Let's go check it out.
Yeah, some people just they make these claims that they hear things or they see things, and so everybody swarms to it. Now, I've been to places that people say, "Oh, this place is so haunted," and I get there and all I'm doing is talking to myself in the dark. But I'll have to say some pretty strange things did happen in Ohio. And that one, oh, go ahead.
Have you ever run into, while doing an investigation, another team elsewhere in the complex doing their own investigation and freak each other out? I just think that would be fantastic comedy.
Not freak each other out. The only time that I've been there when somebody else is doing an investigation is when they have an event. At the one in Ohio was an event with the guys from Ghost Hunters, the original. Mm-hmm. And so that's the only reason. And I hate doing those because you have people that won't stop talking when you're trying to do stuff. So you have to throw all evidence basically out the window. But when it comes to like the K2 meter, if you're not familiar with it,
I watched every episode of Ghostbusters, and I used to play the video game, sir.
We were in a cell with Samantha Halls, who is the daughter of Jason Halls, the guy that started TAPS and one of the stars of Ghost Hunters. And when she started asking questions, that meter would go off. But if I ask a question, it wouldn't do anything. So I'm sitting there shaking my head. We're both in the same room and nothing has changed. Why is it always going off when she asks a question? That's not fair. No, she's real sweet though. I love Samantha.
So you said Ohio got weird. Tell me about Ohio.
Ooh. Well, that was the main thing, was that the meter going off. And then we got to go with Dave Tango to do some EVP sessions. And I say I have to kind of throw it out the window because there are other people in the building. But there were a few little things that popped up on the recorder that I don't think were other people that were doing investigations.
Breakout EVP for those of us who aren't in the know.
That's the electronic voice phenomenon. So you may not hear it with your own ears, but if you play back a recorder, you listen carefully, you may pick up a voice.
Gotcha. So instead of a bustle in the hedgerow, it's actually a stairway to heaven.
Yes.
Got it. Got it. So there was noises. I have seen, now my wife is fanatical about paranormal, and when I told her that I was getting to interview you and mentioned ghost hunters, and she went, oh my God, I really want to be there. So she's all about it. I have seen some of them. There's always a lot of night vision green, and explain the dots. It seems to me like it's a light reflection off dust motes, but the orbs.
Oh, the orbs.
Yeah.
You know, I don't put a lot of validity into orbs, simply because, like you said, it could be light reflection coming off the dust. It could be bugs. I mean, you don't know. But every once in a while, you'll get a perfect one, and it seems to move on its own, and it'll even pulsate. And so that makes you kind of think maybe this is something that is paranormal. But I have to know the conditions too. Because sometimes you go into an old house, you kick up dust, it looks like you got orbs all over the place. So you won't find a whole lot of evidence like that on my page.
To which I have to ask, what is your page?
Well, I have my Pit Paranormal, which is P period, I period, T period, T period, which stands for Paranormal Investigative Team Texas. And that's on Facebook. I have my Into the Pit page on Instagram. And the rest of it's mostly just about the podcast. So like our TikTok, which only thing you're going to find on there is clips of interviews that I've done, and Twitter, which I just put my
I like how you
podcast on.
downplay that with the word just, not just interviews. You have interviews with the top ghost hunters in the world on your channel. So this is the other thing that I get to do as the host of this show today, Kyle, is give yourself some credit, man. You have some amazing ghost hunters that are on there, whether you believe it, whether you not believe it. The people that you have had on to talk about it are the absolute pinnacle of who you want to hear it from. So I guess in a sense, that was good hunting. You hunted good ghost hunters. You're the ghost hunter trying to get you a new podcast.
There you go. I'm very blessed with that, because you know, when you're able to get these folks before they get to be named people or big name people, they're a little more willing to come on the show. But then once they've kind of made their popularity, then they can put your name out there. And so the ones that are more seasoned, they'll be more willing to come on the show. And I'm very, very blessed to have Mustafa Gadalori as one of my best friends. He's helped me quite a bit.
So as a ghost hunter, when something weird happens anywhere, like Food Line, excuse me, that's our local grocery store. What do you have down there? Piggly Wiggly? What do you have in Texas?
We had Piggly Wiggly.
Oh, Buc-ee's. All right. So you walk into Buc-ee's and something weird happens, which is pretty much every Buc-ee's that there is. Do you immediately wonder if it's a paranormal incident? Whereas for me, I would just look and go, gravity.
A place like Buc-ee's, it'd be very difficult because they're open all the time. And you've got so many people in there. it'd be easy for something to get knocked over, be right on the edge, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden it just falls off. So I wouldn't think too much about that.
And the mac and cheese wasn't possessed today. Got it. But then you have places like the Alamo, which I know is a few hours away from you, but plenty of I presume psychic energy. Am I using the words correctly? Would be present on the grounds there, which makes me wonder what would be the pinnacle for you to hunt. What would be the best grounds for you to stop on?
Where would be the biggest? Oh my gosh. Well, if it have to be here in Texas, man,
Our
that's a
travel
good
budget
question.
is not the Travel Channel's budget, so we're kind of limited to like maybe an Uber.
Well, if I had the chance, there's a battleship in Corpus Christi, and I'm having a brain fart trying to think of the name of it, but I would like to get on that ship. But you can pay to get on there, but if you've got a group, it makes it more difficult. If they let me have the run of the place and there was nobody else on there but us, that would be, I think, the pinnacle for me.
So you're talking about the Lexington, because not because I'm smart, but because I have Google. And has there been indication? Now, this interests me as a veteran. Are there indications of paranormal activity happening on the old battleships and World War I, World War II ships?
There's a lot of stories, but when you had like the Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventurers and these other teams that they go there specifically to do a television show, and I can't say that all the evidence is real unless I've been there. So I don't know if it's for entertainment value or if this is actual evidence, but the stuff that I've seen, I'm curious if I could get the same thing.
And ghost stories are somewhat ubiquitous with sailing and pirate ships, the ghost ships on it. Through all of your interviews and years of investigating this, what do you think is aside from ghosts being the origin, and that's an easy answer, I'm not going to let you get away with that, what do you think the origin is of the ghost story, of why we feel this need to share stories of the unknown with each other? There's got to be some type of a root equation inside the human matrix, and you're probably much closer at finding that than most. What do you think?
People love to tell stories, of course, but it's that shock value that, oh my God, really? You think really that happened? And so when you have stories like that continuously, what, around the campfire, and even at the water cooler at work, just to pique somebody's curiosity when you're telling a story, I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And some of it's over exaggerated, and how much of it is rooted in truth, I don't know.
Are you somebody that would want to be called? I mean, how would somebody who has a bit? I live about 10 miles from a little town called Dillon. In Dillon, there's a house. It's been vacant for 20 years that I know of. In the basement of it, it used to be a temporary prison cell for Union soldiers who were captured by the Confederates, and they were being taken to Richmond, which is about an hour that way. Because you need to know that it's that way, not that way, right? Anyway, so about an hour away is Richmond, headquarters of the Confederacy, and they used to overnight at this little house. And I went down there, man, and I'm a skeptic, but it creeped me out. And maybe because there were spiders, but aside from dialing 555-2368, as all of us Ghostbuster fans who watched every episode and used to play the video game know that that's the phone number for Ghostbusters. Who are you gonna call? Who do you reach out to just have somebody come by and be like, nah, it's all your imagination, or yeah, there may be actually some EVP, or they pull out a K2, or.
Well, of course, you get on the internet and you Google, and you'll find out who all the local teams are. It's usually pretty easy to find. Sometimes you can just reach out on Facebook and they'll say, oh yeah, I know that it's such and such team. And sometimes you just have a good network of investigators that you're able to call on. I know some in other states that I can say, hey, are you near this place? Do you know anybody? But your regular citizen, well, they can just usually Google it.
And as you say that, I Google it. And apparently a few months ago, there was actually an episode of a winery here close to me. Um, so ghost hunting is not your only thing. Of course, you talk about all of the paranormal. I saw the phrase psychic medium in one avenue attributed to you. Sir, are you well, I'll let you imagine what my question is.
I am not a psychic medium.
Oh my God, how did you know I was going to say that?
Because I'm a
but
psychic.
But you just said you weren't. All right. I don't know about you, but I'm enjoying this. Hopefully the listeners are like, hey, this thing's anyway. So you've interviewed them. I'm going to not use the word investigated. When it comes to psychics and Ouija boards and not necessarily the occult side of it, but just the prognosticators. What's your take on that?
I used to not believe in that stuff at all. I always thought that it was some kind of parlor trick. Usually you've got somebody who can watch your little twitches and things, and they can pick up on if they're getting close to getting an answer from you. So that's how all that stuff like at the circus works. And I've seen the behind the scenes when it comes to psychics figuring out, how to ask this question. And it's not as hard as it seems to be. But we went to one of my wife's friend's house, and we were meeting a psychic there. And I'm on the way going, whatever. And my wife is fixing to get a reading, and I'm just sitting there. I'm not really paying attention intensely because I wasn't getting the attention, so why should I pay attention?
Yeah, no, that's good relationship advice right there. Well done, Coyote. Well done. What pack does this coyote belong to? He's a lone coyote.
But anyway, this lady, she looked at me and she said, you lost someone this morning, and his name starts with a B. And I was taken aback because literally that morning my grandfather passed away, and his name's Byron. And I only went because my wife was so excited to get to go do this. I didn't want to take that away from her. I was like, how in the world is she going to know that? We just met her, and I didn't even know my wife's friend. And I don't know, my wife wouldn't have brought that up, So I'm kind of curious. Tell me more. And then she said, why do I keep hearing the water boy? Like, we just looked at each other and started laughing. And the reason why is because my wife and I and her kids, every time we're like driving around or whatever, we're always doing quotes from the water boy. That's like our favorite movie as a family.
Oh, I thought you said water boiling. And I'm like, does this have to do with eggs? Are they soft cooked, hard boiled? No, Waterboy, got it. Yep, yeah.
And that's not something
We're
most
big
people
fans of Waterboy in our house as well. So she probably saw the Adam Sandler pin on your wife's shirt.
Oh, maybe that's what it is. Or maybe that shirt that said, I watched the Waterboy. No. These were things that this lady would not have known to ask us. Because wasn't something that we shared with everybody. So how in the world would she know it? And really, I think the one thing that solidified it for me is we invited her to be part of our team. We went to a house, and she told the lady, there's a presence here, and it's someone in your family that has been shunned. And I feel like she's an aunt, and she had a child that passed away. And the lady's going, no, there's nothing like that in our family. And so in my head, I'm thinking, well, she's already proved that this is fake. A couple of days later, the lady called me up and she said, "You're not going to believe this, but I talked to my mom, and apparently I have an aunt that no one wanted to talk about. And she lost a baby. She used to sleep around a lot, and she did a lot of drugs and what have you. And her child ended up passing away, and she had never known that all her life. She never knew that. So how in the world is a psychic going to know that?
Local psychic? See,
No.
instantly I go into intel, investigator. Well, let's round up all the usual suspects and have some interviews. Um, so through these interviews, I guess you could say that you feel like there is something to it.
There is something to it.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper into Coyote. That sounded
Okay.
weird. I'm sorry. I didn't want to make this weird.
That's what she said.
All right. Hey, it's your show, sir. Excuse me. It's my show. It's my show today. I'm trying to be appropriate. All right. All right. So I really want to get into you. Oh, sorry.
Atlantic Rhythm section.
Speaking of being highly inappropriate and saying things that are not necessarily good for public, you marry people. You're a reverend.
I am. Was a Baptist preacher for about 5 years.
That explains the voice.
Is that what it is?
Now, was this see, I call myself a recovering Baptist after living in Texas for a while. Was this a Southern Baptist hellfire and brimstone? Like, did you start undressing while preaching?
No, I didn't undress. But
I mean, you start rolling up the sleeves.
No, I did do that sometimes. But no, it was Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. So yes, very much fire and brimstone.
And are you still? Well, we talked before, and you said there was only one topic I couldn't talk about, which is I don't want to talk about politics either. So are you still of the faith, or?
I had a falling out with my preacher, and a lot of things happened during my life. And my father ended his life, and then right after that, my little brother ended his life. And
Oh my gosh.
I was just, and it wasn't too long after that, my best friend did the same thing. And so I blamed God for a lot of it. And I walked away from it. And then I just didn't want to have anything to do with church, didn't want to have anything to do with God. And then 10 years go by, I meet my wife that I have now. And she's kind of helped me get back on a spiritual path. But instead of putting my eyes on man, I have my eyes on God. And that's the problem, is I put too much faith in men. And then when they let me down, I didn't lean on God like I was supposed to. So now I don't trust going to churches anymore.
So you get to participate in probably the best part of being a minister, and that's marrying people. I love the fact that it was weddings your way. I think that was how it was phrased. What's the coolest wedding that you've done?
Ooh, I think the coolest wedding that I've done, my wife has a friend who's from somewhere, I forgot what country he's from, but it's out in the Middle East. And they wear, the
Robes.
Well, it's a robe, but it's like a dress looking thing that even the men wear. So they bought me one that I got to use in the ceremony. But he was of the, I think, Hindu faith, and she was Catholic. So they compromised and decided they'd use me.
He was Hindu, she's Catholic. We compromised, and Buddhist now.
But it was so much fun, and the family was so nice to me. I mean, you're talking about, his family was very much Hindu, and her family was very much Catholic. But I was so welcomed, and I got to eat all this wonderful food, and it was just so much fun. I never dreamed of doing anything like that.
The comedian in me is just thinking of how that that union moving forward, they go to some local church and like, all right, well, you're going to have to do 7 Hail Marys and 2 Hare Krishnas.
Right.
Just kind of atone for that. um, uh, I, I got to touch on this because I've worked with veteran suicide for so many years, trying to stop vet suicide, and I've lost family members and friends. You had 3 hits, such big hits. There's somebody listening who has the same thing, and I know we talked on the very beginning, but how can you just not give up on everything at that point? And because it just rocks your foundation. And
I've-
you were a Baptist pastor, like you had a, as the world would say, a very solid foundation. And yet it was built on sand. Not that I, know the Bible or anything.
Well, during that time, with especially the falling out I had, and it just seemed like the church had kind of turned on me, and it was for something somebody else had done, but I got blamed for it. Preacher wouldn't even listen to my side of the story, and then after my dad, and then my little brother, my best friend, I don't know, it just seemed like I was being abandoned left and right, and it hit me hard. And I'm not going to say I didn't fall. Once I stepped away from the church, I got right back into drinking and doing drugs. And I ended up splitting with my first wife, and I moved in with a friend of mine who drank quite a bit. And so I got even heavier into the drinking, and then the drugs were so easy to get a hold of then. And I just didn't care anymore. I mean, an 8-ball wouldn't last me a night. And then I'd get that big bottle of Seagrams, and it wouldn't last me the weekend.
So what made you start caring again?
When it came down to my I had a heart attack, and after the heart attack, well, let me step back a little bit. My wife and I ended up getting back together again, but I still kept drinking and doing the drugs. And then I had the heart attack, and then the doctor said, look, you need to get your life together or you're going to die. And so I started to take care of myself. And then I found out my wife had been having an affair, and she ran off with a younger guy.
So abandoned again.
But then it came down to getting custody of the kids. And I was determined I was going to get my kids. I think that was the turnaround for me. It was like, you know what, I need to be a dad. And now I'm clean and sober, and she's the alcoholic and drug addict.
So a cause bigger than you.
Yes.
Your children is what pulled you through.
Yes.
And just, if I can say personally, thank you for what you do for us vets, and for the people that you have here on your show, as well as the shout outs that you give on social media to various vet organizations that are trying to help stop this scourge on our young people. Well, now middle-aged people, right?
Yeah.
I can't even remember when I was young. That's how old I am now. Well, now that we're on such a positive note, the only way to get out into the positive note is with a hard turn. Are you ready for this? I'm the master of segues.
Okay.
So I understand that if we focus on this topic, it could be a waterworks, but you have water certs. And that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how you have water distribution certifications. And as a Baptist pastor, is this like a winery thing, or because on one of your socials many lifetimes ago, you have a couple certifications on water distribution systems and techniques, but
Yes.
I haven't heard any of that in your story. So is this one of those cases where what we do in our 20s just doesn't really play out in our 40s and our 50s?
I started working in public works when I was about 25 years old. And I have over 20 years of experience. And I retired from the city of Pasadena here in Texas as a supervisor. And then I got back into it when we moved up here by Austin, working, doing the sampling and everything. But now I'm 100% retired.
So you weren't laying pipe, you were inspecting others' pipes. Got it. All right. So we're at about the 45-minute point. Except for that weird glitch, but we're at the 45-minute point. I know your shows normally last an hour. I'm very excited to talk about Bomoso. And you mentioned earlier it's your buddy's thing. If the listener has not gone and checked out Bomoso, Bomoso, there's a really cool graphic and a video there about Airbnb shipping containers.
Mhm.
You have a design background. What is your association and what is your take on this whole shipping container thing? Is it a fad? Is it not? In Afghanistan, I lived in one 10 years ago, but it was not considered an Airbnb. We got air raids like that happened. That's about as and bombs and bullets. So I guess it could be an air raid B&B, but talk to us about the concept of shipping container homes and specifically what Bomoso does.
Well, Bomoso is a company that's owned by a friend of mine, and he designs homes out of these shipping containers, and the stuff he does is just absolutely remarkable. He's been an architect for forever, and he just got the idea he was going to do his own thing, and that was part of it. It's a long story because he's gone from one thing to another thing to another thing, and this is kind of
Not that you and I have ever done that. I mean,
No.
water distribution, Bigfoot, ghost hunting, but no, that's fine. At least we stay on track, right, Pastor?
Right.
Well, Coyote, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm very grateful that you let me steal your show for the day. And oh, sorry. I don't know how you sign off. I'll let you sign off the episode because I got to sign in on the episode. But again, thanks for sharing your history with your listeners because that's something that they want and they just don't be able to get much of. So I'm hoping that this one, because it's all about you, gets to be one of your top episodes ever.
That would be awesome. Main thing is I want to get the word out there to help these people that I have on the show, especially the veterans. And there's people like I had a lady that's advocating for MSA, which is a very rare disease, and I would like for at least her to get attention so she can raise the money to help people. I mean, it's not something a lot of people know about. I didn't know about it until she told me. So that's
all right. Well, then I'm going to
purpose.
tell your listeners, you right there, you listening to this, right? First, you better hit the like and subscribe buttons because that's just, come on, everyone knows that. But you need to share this out with people because Coyote here is trying to make a positive difference. It's all about positivity. It's all about self-motivation, what inspires you. And you heard his story. You know what he's gone through to get here. So he's put in the time, he's put in the effort, and he's put in the tears. It's time for you to help because we're all about community. That's the only way that we're going to get through, for me personally, the vet suicide epidemic, for you with everything that you're dealing with on the side, whether it be physical issues, medical issues, family issues, ghosts, sneaking into your bedroom at night. Those are weird issues. All of that comes down to having a tribe, having a community, some cause bigger than you. If you're watching or listening and you don't have a cause, start with this one. Be Coyote's biggest fan and be a supporter. I'm not going to plug your Patreon if you have one. I'm just going to tell them, just share it out. Just share it out with people because I guarantee after 4 years of daily episodes, man, there's something in here people are going to like. And there's quite a few that I've been listening to for the last 3 days because I dig it. And we'll talk offline about a couple people because, yeah, you got some, aside from me being the one weirdo, you got some really neat people that you've had the honor of talking with. So
I am blessed.
thank you for me having the honor of talking with you. And
My pleasure.
Kyle, I wish you nothing but the best and Godspeed, sir.
Thank you. And to all my folks out there, if you happen by this channel, this is your first time, I hope you'll come back. Please, like he said, hit that subscribe button. Get that word out. For those of you who are regular, it's because of you that I get to do this. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.